but the clock is still ticking on climate change. And that's why we thought it was so important to invite our colleagues from one of SCIAF's partners in Zambia, Caritas Kabwe, to share their experience about what life is like at the front line of the climate crisis. We will also be joined by Father Jim Lawlor, the parish priest at Immaculate Conception in Maryhill, Glasgow, and he'll be sharing his perspective on the role of Catholics in Scotland. First of all, we're going to hear from Caritas Kabwe. Caritas Kabwe is a Catholic development agency operating in the Diocese of Kabwe in the central province of Zambia. SCIAF has been working with Caritas Kabwe since 2017 on a project which is joint funded by the Scottish Government, and it supports over 1,000 farming families to increase their household incomes and increase their food supplies. So right now I'm going to hand you over to Sister Marcella, who is the Director of Caritas Kabwe, and Rose Wazwa, who is the Project Manager. So over to you. Sister Marcella, you're still on mute.
Hello, good afternoon to you all. How are you? All right. It's mute. Yeah. It's something. Can you hear me? It's a noise. It's too much noise on our side.
We can hear you. It's a little bit, there's a little bit of interference, but we can still understand you.
Sister, do you have two laptops on?
Yeah, we take it. Might be even better.
That sounds better now.
We are changing the places here right now. I'm coming.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roslyn. I'm the project manager for Caritas Kabwe. I hope you can all hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I'll go first, and then Sister will come in later on. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for having me on this program. Thank you for having organized such a program. I'll start first of all by giving a scenario, two scenarios actually, that we can reflect on as we go on with our sharing. I just want everyone to think of a family in one of our communities. This family is headed by a single woman who is a widow with 3 children aged between 7 years and 2 years. This woman struggled so much in 2017-2018 season to plant her crops, basically maize, thinking that she will have good harvest to feed her children. Unfortunately, there was drought, and so she was not able to harvest much. And now that family is just relying on 3 meals in a week instead of 3 meals in a day. The children are getting malnourished, and she doesn't know what to do. I visited personally this family. I had to go back home and get some food that I had in the store and take to this family because they are really in dire need. So that's just one scenario. But also think of a woman who passed on in 2016 while she was in labor. She developed complications and she was supposed to go for a cesarean section. Unfortunately, there was no power to the hospital that she was taken to, and unfortunately we lost her. I knew her personally. You may wonder what that had to do with climate change, but it's good to know that Zambia relies heavily on hydropower to generate electricity. Less rainfall means less water streams into the Kariba Dam that generates power, and so it means less electricity, and or even no electricity at all. So this woman lost her life, and the life of the child, just because there was no power at the hospital at the time when she needed urgent medical attention. So the impacts of climate change are happening very fast and are hitting communities harder than we anticipated. And for me now, when I hear about climate justice, I think of thousands of people, poor people in rural communities who are struggling and suffering with the effects of climate change, that they may have contributed the least to the cause. These are the people who have least access to resources and technology to adapt to the consequences of climate change. And they also have no capacity to act to reduce their emissions or various causes of climate change. So when I read about climate justice, Mary Robinson Foundation's definition of climate justice states that climate justice links human rights and development to achieve a human-centered approach, safeguarding the rights of the most vulnerable and sharing the burdens and benefits of climate change and its resolution equitably and fairly. But when we visit communities in rural areas, all we see is acute suffering, violation of human rights, no fairness, no equity, but only adversities caused by climate change. So as Caritas Kabwe, we work in solidarity with such communities that are affected by climate change and those that are living in abject poverty. So we are going to take you through the effects of climate change, things that we have seen with our own eyes. We have experienced these realities every time we go to visit these communities in our work. And to be sincere with you, it's difficult sometimes for us to face such realities. So I'll take you through the effects, and then Sister Marcella will come in on some of the strategies that we have tried to employ to help some of the people through the help of SCIAF. So you realize that the most obvious effect is crop failure. So from 2015, Zambia has been having a very low rainfall. It started actually 2014-2015 season. Zambia received very low rainfall, actually drought, and it caught people unawares because we did plan for that. People planned as though everything would be okay, but then unfortunately we were struck by the drought. And since then, we've been receiving very, very low, unpredictable, and unevenly distributed rainfall up to now. So households' access to food has been continuously decreasing because they are not able to harvest enough for their families and even maybe for sale. So people are unable to replenish their food stocks, and some of them have diverted to negative coping strategies, including like eating less meals per week to allow their reserves last long. And some of them are feeding on non-nutritious fruits, others just roots, and others pests such as mice or rats. So such feeding has affected mostly children below the age of 10, the elderly, and the expecting mothers who develop health conditions associated with hunger and starvation. So the first scenario that I gave is just one of those that are living in such conditions. It is not one family, they are not two families, but there are many families that we come across, and they are just like, you can't you can't imagine how they are living. One family that we rescued, they had children who were below 5 years actually. And when we visited there, we found children just lying down and shaking because they didn't eat like for the last 3 days. So sometimes when we go to the field, we know that we are going for the whole day. So sometimes we carry water and we carry some snacks. So we had to give these children what we had, and we carried them to Kabwe so that they are given medical attention and to be given food. So we stayed with them about a week and we released them back home. But these are many families, so we have no capacity to help like just as Caritas Kabwe, but SCIAF has really been supporting us in helping some of these families that are in waste situations. So it has been really hard for people, and yeah, they are barely surviving. So another aspect is lack of water, safe water. You realize that the recurring dry spells are resulting in limited access to clean drinking water for people and animals. And sometimes, like right now, the streams have already dried out, groundwater levels have retreated, and so they are forcing families to turn to very safe drinking water sources where actually animals are supposed to be maybe drinking. So they are drinking the same water that the animals are drinking from the same source. Some of them, they go very far to access even this dirty water. And Icelink can bear me witness. We went with her one time to the field, and she couldn't believe that there are mothers who are walking for over 15 kilometers in search of water. And that water is dirty water, not even clean water. So water has been really a challenge, though we as Caritas Kabwe through SCIAF, we have tried to provide water sources, clean water sources in some of the communities, not all. So there is still need for provision of water. And so women actually are the ones who bear the burden of such effects, because they are the ones who are supposed to go very far to search for food and water. And while there, they actually they increase their protection concerns, because we had cases of sexual and gender-based violence as women go out, and young girls, to look for water. There is one young girl of, I think, 15 years, between 15 and 16 years, who was raped while she had gone for water and was left in a forest. Her place was too far. But luckily enough, there are other women who had gone to draw water. They had her screaming in the nearby bush, and they had to rescue her. So it poses a lot of danger to these people, to these women who go very far to look for water. And so women are most affected because culturally, women form the main agricultural labor force, as well as responsible for providing food and water for the household. So in terms of education, we've had so many children drop out of school, mostly because their household resources have reduced, and so they are not able to pay school fees, and they also don't have school materials, because initially their parents would harvest and sell and take their children to school. But now that they do not have even food in the house, they cannot even afford to pay school fees or some other school materials necessary for the children to study. So some of the children just stays at home because of that, and also because of hunger. Children are not motivated to walk long distances going for school. So they lack just motivation. First, no school fees, no school materials, there is hunger at home, and sometimes parents also use the children to send them to look for alternative livelihood strategies so that they support the parents' efforts. So forced absences from school related to seasonal migration, because some of them migrate. And so it causes a lot of instability because they will be migrating this year, another year again, they go looking for food and pasture for their animals in other places. And so you find there is a lot of instability. And so education needs of children, they are disturbed. And so you can imagine the future of such children. They just lack motivation in studies and they stay home. So the cycle of poverty will go on and on and on unless something is done to motivate children to go to school. And also when they are out of school, they have this child labor because parents send them to go look for food, and some of them, they are very much exploited. They go even to mining, illegal mining sites where they are given very hard work to do, so that at least they give them something small for their food. But they exploit them because they don't pay them according to the work that they have done. And these are very young children. So they grow up not in a well-developed manner. So you can imagine the future of these children with that hard labor. And some of the girls actually are forced into early marriages. Caritas Kabwe actually almost rescued 2 girls who were forced into marriage, a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old. I say we almost, because we lost them, not through death, but they were whisked out into the DRC Congo as we were thinking of following them. So we lost them inside. But 13 years and 12 years and 14 years girls. And these are realities that we face. We've tried to liaise with the traditional leaders in the communities to help us in such. But they wake up in the morning and they find the girls gone. And sometimes even the girls themselves, they will go because at home there is nothing. So they don't see the point of staying at home. So if someone came and lured them into marriage and they are providing something better, they go. So as much as we want to help them, but the situation at home cannot allow them to stay at home. So some are forced into marriage, others they just go into marriage because of the poor conditions at home. In the 2018 and 2019 drought, it was very severe, and most of our farmers lost their livestock because there was no pasture for the livestock. Diseases came up and livestock was lost, especially cattle. And so it leaves the farmer really very vulnerable. So we lost 60%. 60% of our farmers lost their livestock. Yeah. So something else that we can talk about is low hydropower generation. In 2015, as I said, Zambia experienced a drastic reduction in electricity supply, which was highly attributed to reduced low water levels in the reserves caused by poor rainfall in 2014-2015 rain season. So the power cuts, popularly known as load shedding, has been ongoing up to date. Right now, as we are speaking, we are using a generator set because we don't have power. Normally, they cut power for now 9 hours. It was initially 15 hours, but now 9 hours. So even now, even ourselves, we are victims of that. We do not have power. So because of that, many families are having low income because we work, there is a community that we work in called Liteta. So many of our youth had started like venturing into small businesses that needed power. But now, since during the day there is no power, they can't do anything. So they are left just with nothing because they can't work without power. So young entrepreneurial minds are subjected to long hours of idleness as they wait for power connections. Street children, we have really received a big influx of children running away from their villages, the rural communities, coming in towns because of the poor conditions from their homes. And so we are having troubles in towns because these children, when they come, they don't have good coping mechanisms. So they end up stealing. So there is a lot of rise in criminal activities just coming from very young boys coming to look for something to eat from the villages to towns. So these are some of the things that we have experienced, and it's hard for us actually to face such realities. Communities' coping capacities are low, and it's expected that a number of people actually facing food insecurity levels will rise in the coming months. The more mitigation we undertake and the more adaptation resources are made available, then the less loss and damage there will be. But at this stage, loss and damage is unavoidable, and it's already very, very costly. So our priority is to quickly provide relief to vulnerable families as a short-term measure. However, we want to go beyond simply stabilizing the situation. Through your support, we want to offer sustained measures so that people are better able to face and navigate future climate threats without needing external assistance. So ultimately, our goal is about helping people become more resilient so that not every time people will need external assistance. So Sister Marcella is just going to take us through some of the strategies that we have employed to help communities to address the impacts of drought. And then later on, I'll give my conclusion on climate justice. Sister Marcella.
Well, let me share with you something, how Caritas Kabwe helped communities to address the impact of the drought. Caritas Kabwe initiated various activities and interventions designed and implemented to manage drought and ensure communities cope with the prevailing situation. These strategies are both short-term and long-term. Let me talk about now about the sustainable organic agriculture. In 2017, Caritas Kabwe, through the support from SCIAF, started a project that promotes the technology of sustainable organic agriculture, as it had the potential and significantly improved yields of the various crops for farmers that are poorly resourced and are in drought occurring areas. This has been evident to our farmers who adopted the technology in 2018-2019 farming seasons. The use of animal manure, minimum tillage, crop diversification, and mixed cropping has resulted to more yields to farmers that practice their principles. Crop diversification is seen to be more beneficial as farmers plant a variety of crops on one field, as opposed to previously monocropping of maize. Through training and mentorship, many farmers are slowly discarding the idea of growing maize as the main crop. They are shifting to use the traditional crops, such small grains, for example, millets, sorghums, and groundnuts, which are more resistant to drought. Now maybe I will talk about some few words about the drought and disease-resistant livestock. The project, Caritas Kabwe, purchased local goats for the participating farmers with whom we are working. The local goats are resistant to the drought, and they are stronger than the other breed. Of course, the goats help with the manure for the crops. And so the farmers they don't need to buy the fertilizer. They use the drops from the animals as a fertilizer. Of course, they were trained a lot how to use even how to make a compost, tea compost, the other compost, and that's why they're appreciating, and they're appreciating that they were given the goats and they're keeping them well. Of course, as Rose mentioned a lot about the drought, that some areas, they are very pathetic, very sad for us to go and to see that the people, they have to walk hundreds and hundred meters or kilometers to fetch a clean water. So as a Caritas Kabwe, we constructed in different places shallow wells. Of course, we used our own strategy. Some areas, they were quite difficult because it was, some areas we had a lot of stones. The people, they had to struggle to dig. But unfortunately, we are so happy for the support that right now we handed over 17 shallow wells. People, they have that access at least to clean water. And as you've heard from Rose, mostly the most difficult time is from June to December. This time when the shallow of water, the table of the shallow of water is very low, and people, they have to go deeper and deeper, sometimes up to 15, 17 meters, which is very difficult again. As they go deeper, then there's less oxygen. Every few minutes, they have to come up and to take some good breath. Now, maybe let me say another point that I would like to address, that food assistance, of course, as is the drought. Rose mentioned that some people, they were suffering. They had one meal for 3 days, every 3 days, or even less. Anytime when I went to visit the field, I was almost crying seeing the people very old. Sometimes I felt like this is in 21st century. It's impossible. The bones are covered by skin. So we have helped them by making the shallow wells for them. And right now they have access to better water. And then at the same time, we are so grateful to SCIAF as a Caritas Kabwe. When the people cannot have even a small portion of garden, right now, the Good Samaritan came as SCIAF, and we purchased some food for the people. Of course, we have hundreds and hundreds of them. But so far, with the good selection, and we look at the most needy one, we only supported 200 families, mostly the people who are very old, small children below age 5, pregnant women, and the people with disabilities. Now, something which is very nice, and I would like to share with you what we are doing here, and that is through the project intervention, farmers in the groups were trained very well in an entrepreneurship and saving skills. I was so happy to hear that our field facilitators, they trained our farmers very well, and the farmers, they are not only looking at the sky or the soil, what they can produce, but they started even using their own initiatives and how to somehow save the money and to have for the time of the families they need. The farmers, they started rearing chickens. Then they started buying the silk, the African fabrics. We call it like a chitenga, where mostly the ladies, they cover themselves. By that selling, mostly when they are targeting the people coming to the main road, sometimes they have to walk few kilometers to sit, and they are targeting the people from the urban area or from towns, like we go there and coming back. They would like they are selling to us such a product, chickens, local chickens, and the chitengas. For so far, I've heard they are doing very well. and they saved quite a lot of money for their own household. So they're able to buy or even to support their children, especially like this time where the government uplifted the sanction already. We are no longer going to be locked down. Our children are coming to school. So that I believe that we'll be able to send at least some of them, especially the girl child. As Ross mentioned, that is our big issue, that our girls are really targeted and they are victims of some sad situations. Now, beautiful things which I would like to share with you, what we are doing as a Caritas Kabwe. Yes, some farmers, they have to walk kilometers, maybe even to water, to fetch a bucket of water. And then we decided and we trained them how to make the kitchen garden. What it means, near the kitchen, they have a small garden where mostly they protect by they make a wall fence, they put a grass that the chickens will not go inside and destroy the veg. And then they use less water for watering. And definitely they are using a compost and they don't use a fertilizer, which the vegetables are very nutritious and organic. So that is the way we are trying to teach them, and we believe that they will carry on and will raise up some new healthy generations, and our small support from Caritas. With these few words, I think I'll hand over now to Rose.
Just to summarize, climate justice requires effective action on a global scale, which in turn requires a pooling of resources and a sharing of skills across the world. We must tackle the climate problem with solutions that also tackle social injustices. By creating just solutions, we can build a world that is safe for everyone. And we cannot depend on those who have created this problem to solve it alone. Together, we can society through empowerment. But we do not just want to empower communities, we want to make space for their power by telling their stories, just like what we are doing. Because the solutions to fight the climate crisis already exist within the communities that have been excluded. Communities that are fighting injustices and facing the issues directly. So we need to create spaces for their stories and bring them into narrative. And I'm so happy that SCIAF was able to organize such a forum where we can bring out stories for such people. So if we are rooted in the experiences and our connection to the planet, we can overcome the forces that place short-term profit over our collective future. The gender dimension of climate change and in turn climate justice must be highlighted. As I mentioned earlier, the impacts of climate change are different for women and men, and women are likely to bear the greater burden in situations of poverty. So women's voices must be heard and their priorities supported as part of climate justice. In Zambia, and I'm sure in most countries, women are at the forefront of living with the reality of the injustices caused by climate change. They are critically aware of the importance of climate justice in contributing to the right development, being recognized, and they also play a vital role as agents of change within their communities. We have heard that technology and clean energy will solve such crises. But while those are very important, we know that technology alone cannot solve this crisis. We need to expand the focus to also build resilient, thrive communities and create future things like healthy jobs and sustainable development. It is my belief that rooted in our shared value for the planet and our communities, we can build a just society. Our connection to the planet and our personal connection to each other must make us resilient and able to find solutions to tackle the climate problem. Working together and centering the voices of those who have experienced the impact of climate change, we can overcome this crisis. As we work towards addressing the climate crisis, let us also make similar progress towards equity and the protection and realization of human rights. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rose and Sister Marcella, for that very powerful account. I think it's a real eye-opener how interconnected the impact of climate change is. It's not just food supplies, but it touches healthcare and education and gender-based violence as well. So if you have any questions for Sister Marcella or Rose, please start typing them into the chat box now. We'll come to them at the end of the call. But first of all, I'm going to hand over to Father Jim Lawlor.
Hi, everybody. Is this the audio is working? You can hear me okay? Yeah. Yeah. Rose, Sister Marcella, thanks very much for that. I remember a couple of years ago, SCIAF having its annual appeal for your project. So it's really, really lovely. It's quite moving to see you and to hear you talk about what's happened since that appeal and the changes it's made. I approach all of this as an amateur, so it's really good to hear people who are working on the front line and who are supported by all the others in this call today who are much more connected and much more aware of the issues that you described. I was really taken by your description of the lady losing her life and losing her baby. It would never have occurred to me that drought can affect electricity, can affect a hospital. That's a very powerful lesson in itself, so thanks for sharing that. I also was thinking as you spoke how upside down our experience here is, my experience as a priest in Glasgow, but our experience as a country. While you're experiencing the power and the havoc of drought, we over here are experiencing changes that are coming from having too much water, from flooding and so on. And I want to just, mainly for the people who are connected from here, just to remind us of a couple of things that happened in the last 10 days or the last 2 weeks. That train that came off the rails in Stonehaven, they're now saying is the result of erosion from underneath the tracks caused by rain, heavy rain. That the rest and be thankful, that major road up to the north, 2 landslides in a week, again caused by too much water. Just yesterday in the newspaper, I noticed that they reported and recorded that the UK had its hottest ever summer on record. Hard to believe today. So while the shifts in climate are really massive and life-changing for the people in Zambia, we know that there are changes in the climate here too. Not as serious, not as life-changing yet. And I think part of what Rose and Sister Marcella have shared are reminding us maybe that there's an urgency about this here, about being more and more aware and more sensitive as things accelerate and our lives are changing because the whole issue of climate is changing also so rapidly. I'm also thinking that things are upside down in another way, because at the very beginning of your presentation, Rose, you said that the people who have less are suffering most. And that's exactly my kind of perspective and what I've been thinking about meeting and talking to you today, that we who here have a lot suffer least. And while there are climate changes going on here that we're all aware of, we are still relatively safe. We are still relatively unaffected by the major changes in climate that are afflicting your people. So one of the ways I thought about that coming today is that there's a very powerful passage in Pope Francis's document Laudato Si about how we need to marry each other, how we need to unite each other on either sides of the planet, and those that maybe are in some ways causing climate change because of our consumerism and our behaviours and our lifestyles, that we need to be really sensitive to how that is changing the lives of people elsewhere. You both mentioned frequently the word education, and that's a key word for us here. While our folks are very aware of climate change, I'm not sure that we're totally aware that choices I might make today affect people on the other side of the planet. When we met earlier in the month to talk about Laudato Si, and many of the people who are here today again were tuned in that day, one of the things I quoted was a quotation from a Dominican priest, Timothy Radcliffe, who talks about my voisin lointain and my voisin prochain, my neighbour who is right next door and my neighbour who is far away. And this whole global justice, climate justice, means bringing those neighbours closer together. Let me just, if I may, to wind that up, to thank you both again for that very informative and moving presentation, but also just to go to one wee section of Pope Francis. When we looked at this document earlier in the month, there are massive themes in it, global themes about politics and economics and systems and all the rest. And then there's one section which I think speaks to us on this side of the planet and about educating our daily actions and lifestyles. And one paragraph, Laudato Si, says it's about small everyday changes, putting on a jumper instead of putting up the heating, turning off the lights, being careful about resources, just being sensitive to the tiny things that together, educated, we will see how we affect one another. So thanks very much for that presentation. It's great to hear that the SCIAF support is continuing, the Scottish support is continuing in Zambia. Thanks to the folk at SCIAF for making that happen for us. And it'd be great to hear what others have to say in their comments and questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Father. So remember, if you want to ask a question to Father Jim, Sister Marcella or Rose, then please just pop your questions or comments in the chat box. But I'm also having a wee look at the screen now, so if you've got your camera on, you can even stick your hand up and I'll try and call you out. So I'm just scrolling through it just now. But we'll start off with a question from Francine. This is, I think, for Rose and Sister Marcella. She's asking about solar panels and whether there is whether solar panels are a possible alternative to hydroelectricity. I wonder if Sister Marcella or Rose can maybe speak about that and about any other adaptations that are taking place in Zambia at the moment.
I can talk about solar panel. This is very good renewable energy, but in Zambia it's relatively expensive for poor people to afford in the rural areas. But we've been talking about it over and over. It's only that now getting to buy that solar is very expensive in Zambia. The solar panels.
Thank you. I have another question, Rose or Sister Marcella, from Father Jim this time, about what impact has COVID-19 had on your work in Caritas Kabwe over the last few months? Rose or Sister Marcella? Question about the impact of COVID-19 on your work in Caritas Kabwe?
Yes, COVID-19 actually it really impacted our communities negatively because of the lockdown. There was no movement of food from one place to another, and so those in the rural areas could not get food from the urban, because most urban people get food along the corridor road. And so it was very hard for them even to access food because of the lockdown. And then even if they accessed that food, it was very expensive because the inflation has gone too high ever since the COVID-19 came into play. So food prices have gone too high. And so we had to come in to help people in the villages. And some of the goats actually that we bought for people, they had to slaughter some of them and use them as food. Yeah. And I could also talk about gender-based violence. We experienced a lot of gender-based violence in our areas. And we attributed this actually to COVID-19, where since there is lockdown, people are not moving out to go look for jobs wherever they used to go look for jobs. And so they are just seated in the house, close together, they are not used. And so a lot of emotions come up. And we have experienced women coming to us with such cases like violence in the homes.
Thank you. There was a question from Kathy there about women and girls. She asked, why are men so absent? Is there any other reasons why you think that the women and girls have been specifically have borne the burden of climate change?
Sorry, are you addressing to me?
Yes, about the impact of climate change. Why women and girls are so badly affected.
Women were badly affected because traditionally here, women are charged with the responsibility of going out to look for food and water for the household. Men, yes, have that responsibility, but when situations happen, men retreat and they leave everything for women. So the women feel for the children, and they just have to come up and with a strategy of how to look for food, because the man will sit or go to drink just to reduce the pressure or stress that they have thinking about the life's struggles. So you find that the man is gone to drink or to meet with other men, and they have left home with nothing. So the woman will just take up the role to set up, go and look for water, go and look for food. And while they are there, many things happen. Yeah.
You see, Jonathan, to add what Rosie has shared, I would like to add something that according to our African culture and tradition, yes, it is that the husband will say, I'm the head of the family. But as Rose said, he will sit, he will observe, or he will go for drinking. But when something goes wrong, when there is no food, he goes to a wife, or he starts insulting, beating her. And in fact, he contributes nothing. But then he will say, I'm the head of the family, I have to eat. But you are the one who has to bring the food inside and feed me. So that's certain things. We have a culture and tradition which is very difficult for us, again, to change at once.
Thank you, Sister Marcella. I have another question for you about crop diversification. You were talking about how the farmers are learning how to use different techniques to diversify crops. Is that to feed the family, or is it to grow crops to sell at markets?
Of course, you know, the families, as they do that, mostly what they do to feed the families, to look for the money to send the children to school. As you know, at home, there's not only the school, but sometimes they have to go even to look for the medication aid. And sometimes it's like they have to walk 20, 30, if not more kilometers. Of course, you know, they have to look for the transport. That mostly the money goes for that. If they produce a bit more, if they have more, they sell it, of course, to get some money. Of course, they need, and we've seen like maybe to buy basic, or let me put it, a bucket or chair or simple things at home in the deep rural areas. But generally that they are looking. The other issue when I observed, yes, where we have tried and we are trying to tell them that they have to produce more. But from my experience, the family, for example, they stay at home without cooking oil for 6 or 7 months. They don't have bar of soap. They don't have the basic things. Sometimes it's like they'll get something from the field, straight they want to go and take a few kwachas and to buy. Because, you know, I can imagine if there's no salt, not cooking oil at home. But generally, it is something to produce more, to sustain, to have for the family. But we are like encouraging them to work very hard. If they have more, then they can improve even the style of life.
Thank you, sister. You were also telling us about the kind of coping mechanisms which families have turned to when there has been drought and when there's been crop failure. Are you able to tell us a bit more about what you saw in the fields during the 2018-2019 drought, about the kind of measures which families had to take when there was little food?
Yes, some of the things I can share, but I think even Rose can add to that, because usually she goes to the field. I'm not always in the field with them, but yes, I do go there. But definitely, if there is something like, it's really pathetic, to be honest with you, if there's a drought and they cannot produce nothing, then that's mostly we are focusing on such a poor families. And as I've said earlier, we had to step in when it's a drought like this time. This time it's very difficult up to March for them. We have to sometimes to supplement through like last time it was through the SCIAF to give them a basic things like mile. We bought even like beans, the basic things. We are not looking for something which is luxury for their daily life, at least. Maybe from this one, or Rose can add from her experience as well, if you like, Rose.
Yeah, sister has spoken like for everything, but what I can add is Central Province is also a home for many commercial farmers. They have big irrigation systems, and so for them, they produce. So when the poor people face the drought experience, they go to commercial farmers to look for jobs there. So once they realize that for them, they will not harvest anything, most of the time they go looking for jobs from commercial farmers, and sometimes they are not given fairly. They are exploited. But yeah, as sister has said, we most of the time have to come in and help them. Yeah.
Thank you. Father Jim, we also have a question for you, and it's about what would you say to people who might argue that climate justice is not a faith issue?
Well, I think another part of what the Laudato Si has done, I think what many of us are aware is that this is now becoming a challenge to expand what we would mean by morality. So I cannot be content here with everything that's available to me, knowing that my brothers and sisters, you know, in my own community, as well as on the other side of the world, don't have what I take for granted. It's back to that, I think, that key point of Laudato Si, which maybe I didn't stress earlier, that everything is interrelated. The whole thrust of this new morality, if I can call it that, is integral, that we're all of us interconnected. And that means that the whole of humanity is interconnected. So, you know, like, for example, to hear Rose describing that lady losing her life and losing her baby should hurt me today, because that's a sister that I never knew. And it's a challenge to my lifestyle that in some way contributed, and however indirectly, to that situation. So I don't know if that quite explains it, but it's care for the planet, care for our home, awareness of the damage that I have done now has to be ranked as a moral issue, and indeed part of that social sin that the church has always taught, but which is now being expanded much more clearly to include every area of ecology. And I hope that helps a wee bit.
Thank you, Father. We've got time for just a couple more questions. Firstly, I'm going to take Francine's point. She's been asking about what we can do to offer practical support, and I was going to pass over to one of my colleagues at SCIAF, Aisling, who will be able to respond to that. So Aisling, if you could respond to Francine's point, please.
Hi there, yes. So Francine's asking about being able to provide the essentials to people in the communities. And I would say that the work that we're currently doing with Caritas Kabwe and the communities they're supporting, it's about we're supporting them to grow more food so that then they have enough to sell, so that then they themselves can buy the basic needs for their households. So rather than us providing, they work together as a family, they work together as a community, and they themselves then have the resources to pick and choose what the priority is for their household. So for some people, they put the money, and Sister Marcella spoke about the savings groups that people have set up in their entrepreneurial work. That all goes towards them having some resources that they can then use themselves to decide what is the priority for their household. Perhaps it is things like paying for school materials, or for others it could be that they want to have some livestock so that then they can sell milk to neighbours, eggs, things like that. So the project is working to address the basic needs of the community members. But at present we wouldn't provide things like soap or the oil and salt unless it was in an emergency situation, which is what it was last year. My colleague Stephen is also on the call here, and we both travelled to Zambia last August, and we saw the impact the drought had had on the communities, and it was following that and following close work with Sister Marcella and with Rose that then we started to do the food provision. But that wouldn't be our first port of call or first step with these communities. It would be about supporting them to address their needs. I'm not sure if that covers Francine's points. The other point about the parishes link, I'll definitely take that forward to our communities department and raise that with them as an idea. And absolutely, like, getting all the parishes here to be able to provide support to across Zambia, I mean, that's fantastic. I don't know how it would work in practice, but we can definitely take that forward and start a discussion within SCIAF. Jonathan, I'll pass back to you.
Thank you very much. No, that's great. I think we've just got time for one more question, and there was a point, a couple of similar points made by Liz Snodgrass and Roseanne Brown. Roseanne said about how we need to use our collective voice as concerned Christians to demand change from those with the power to drive change on a larger long-term scale. And Liz Snodgrass asked what message each of our speakers would have for the COP26. So I think if I could go to each of you in turn, we'll start off with Father Jim. When the world leaders come to Glasgow next year for COP26, what would you like to see them do?
Sorry, could you say that again, Jonathan? What would we want them to do?
Yeah, when we have the Global Climate Summit in Glasgow, what action would you like to see come from that?
Well, I think we need to take some of what's been discussed today, that people need to be heard. You know, we're hearing from Sister Marcella and from Rose, but you know, there should be a concerted voice crying out for justice on behalf particularly of those who don't have that voice. And like someone's just said in the chat, that people as concerned Christians need to demand change from those with power to drive change on a larger scale. I absolutely endorse that. And I think while there's an area here where Christians can work together, I think this is actually a profoundly human area that we can all work together across faiths and indeed people of no faith backgrounds.
Thanks, Father. And Sister or Rose, would you like to share a message for the UN Climate Summit?
Yes.
Sister Marcella, what action would you like to see world leaders take when they meet for the Climate Change Summit?
Well, for me, the way I see It is like for us being so many years here in Africa, I can say, to be honest with you, being 37 years living in Africa, they are lovely, beautiful country, but as even Father, I think Father mentioned that we have to work a lot with the mindset of the people to help them to understand that we have to start working very hard and to be self-sustained. So far, we are happy that we have received a great support from SCIAF, and we feel that we should continue trying I would use the word to convert them to.
I think we might have lost the sound there, unless it's just me. Yeah, no, I think we've lost the sound. But I think it's just about time to wrap up. So I want to thank Sister Marcella, Rose, and Father Jim for taking the time to speak to us today. We're right in the middle of the season of creation, and if you go to the SCIAF website, you will be able to see other events which are taking place in the next couple of weeks. We've joined forces with the Scottish Catholic Education Service and Justice and Peace Scotland to bring a series of Laudato Si workshops for teachers. Also on the Feast of St. Francis of Assisi, we are hosting a workshop led by Liz Snodgrass and Sister Mary Kilpatrick from the For the Love of Creation project. And you can find out more about all those events if you go onto the website at sciaf.org.uk/events. So thanks once again, everybody, for taking the time to join us today. I will send you an email about those next events and also a recording of today's call. So thanks very much again to our speakers.